Marty, can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Good. All right. Let me know if you can hear Brad and Corey.
Can you hear us?
Good morning, Marty.
Good morning, you're coming through.
Okay,
Cool.
good
Thank you,
deal.
Marty.
Thanks.
Now, it looks like you guys are trying to use a camera, but all I see is a black screen.
I'm sorry, say it again, Marty.
It looks like y'all are trying to use a camera, but I just see a black screen right now.
We don't have a camera on this. We're in the OPC conference room.
Gotcha.
It's been a long time since I've been in this conference room. Wait.
Hey, everybody. We are still waiting for participants to log on. Looks like we've got Marty from DE, Jeff and Lorene from Ameren. Is there anybody else on that can identify themselves?
Yeah, Dr. Mark, this is Jeff Cable with the commission staff.
Hi, Jeff. Thanks. Oh, we got some more people. Looks like Bellman just joined from Spire and Brian File from Evergy. All right, we will plan on starting here shortly. Let's give it a few more minutes. James Owen has shown up.
Hi, everybody.
Okay, we will give it a couple more minutes. We'll start at 10:05, just to allow people to come in. Do we have anybody from Liberty Utilities present? Okay. We had a question from Diana Carter asking us how to unmute. I think you just click on the microphone icon if you would like to speak. Looks like we've got representatives from all the utilities and state agencies now. Okay. Nate, can you hear us?
Loud and clear.
Excellent. Okay. All right. Thank you. Good morning for the MEAC, Missouri Energy Efficiency. What's the A stand for? Advisory?
Advisory Council.
Advisory Council Statewide Collaborative. I think this is our fourth one of these.
No, it's several.
Or several, right?
Yeah, sure.
All right. Looks like we've got 16 participants online. If we could go around and do introductions. I'll start off. My name is Jeff Mark. I'm the Chief Economist with Missouri Office of Public Counsel. And in our conference room, I also have with me
Brad Fordson with Commission staff.
and
Corey Boasted with Commission staff.
we've already heard from Jeff Keeble, counsel with Missouri Public Service Commission. If we could go around, I'm just gonna, if representatives from DE could identify themselves.
Morning, everyone. This is Marty Hyman, Missouri Department of Natural Resources, Division of Energy.
Thanks, Marty. Anybody else from DE planning on showing up today?
I'm not sure. You might get Jordan, but not sure.
Okay, well, we're happy to have you. Anybody from Renew Missouri?
Hi, Jeff. This is James Owen. I'm the Executive Director of Renew Missouri. I believe Philip is my other colleague here. Philip?
Well, we can see Philip's name in there. Philip, when you get a chance, just unmute and introduce yourself.
Sounds like he's very deep in thought.
Fair enough, fair enough.
I think Andrew might be joining, but he's got a energy efficiency for all call that's got a standing call at 10 a.m. So I think he might be coming later.
Okay.
Hey,
All
can you hear me now? Hello?
Yes, we can. Thanks,
Hey,
Phil.
sorry about that. Good morning, everybody.
Just to remind everybody, we are, per commission rules, we are recording this session and it will be on EFIS at a later date. Let's go with Ameren, Missouri. Who do we have representative from Ameren, Missouri?
Hi, this is Lorraine Wallickson.
Good morning, Lorraine.
Morning.
Hey, Jeff. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. This is Jeff Friedrich from Ameren, Missouri.
Excellent. Thanks, Jeff.
We may also have Steve Wills coming in and out today.
Okay. All right, great. From Evergy, Missouri.
Hey everybody, it's Brian File. Good to hear from you. Good to see you. We will also have coming in and out Natalie Gray from the products team, as well as Randy Spalla from our evaluation measurement verification. I think I'm the only one on the call at the moment, so looking for discussion.
Excellent. Thanks, Brian. From Spire, Missouri.
Shaylin Dean is on the call, Spire, and I think Bellman from my team's on the call. And I don't know if I'm seeing Lamar on the call yet, but he may be on the call at some point as well.
Okay, thanks, Shaylin. From Liberty Utilities.
Nate Hackney, Senior Analyst over Energy Efficiency. Joining me today might be, I know Kim Dragoo, my manager, is traveling for business and has intermittent accessibility. She may end up on today at some point. I also just forwarded the invite. I'm not sure if our brand new PM, Greg Holm, I just forwarded the invite to him. I'm not certain if he was on the distribution list. If he wasn't, that's totally fine again, because he's been with our team for about 3 weeks now. So he may pop on today, because I did just forward him the invite. Oh, and also Ryan Thompson looks like he's out there. Hey, Ryan, introduce yourself.
Hello, I am Ryan Thompson with the regulatory department at Liberty.
All right, thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Nate. We have several other actors that have joined. We'll go right on down the line. Is there an Annabella on?
Hi, yeah, that's me. I'm with the Andel Policy Group.
I'm sorry, with what group?
Andel Policy Group.
Okay. And
Hey, Jeff, sorry to interrupt. I think Diana Carter is the call-in user, and she may have been on mute. I just got an email from her.
excellent. Welcome aboard, Diana Carter. Let's see. Randy Spale.
Yes, here with Evergy. Yeah. Good morning. E&V manager.
Thanks, Randy. Samarth, you want to introduce yourself? Well, Samarth is
Yeah.
with Mia, Midwest Energy Efficiency Alliance.
Sorry about that. I think I was double muted. Are you able to hear me?
We can hear you now. Thanks.
Yeah. Hey, Summers Mediker with the Midwest Energy Efficiency Alliance. Sorry.
Excellent. And looks like we have a representative from Recurve.
Yes. Hi, good morning. This is Shanika Vora. I'm a policy analyst with Recurve Analytics.
Excellent. Thanks for joining us, Shanika. All right. Well, we appreciate everybody's patience with getting our statewide collaborative off the ground. We had a couple restarts due to some conflicts and scheduling. So we realized, this was a relatively last minute reschedule for Tuesday morning here, but it's no doubt a very important topic that we plan on discussing here, and that's to discuss in more detail pays or pay as you save financing on bill tariff and potential next steps. As many people on this call are familiar with, we had the month of May was jam-packed with Rocky Mountain Institute e-accelerator meetings discussing this topic that culminated in a final presentation and has led to this discussion that we're actually having this morning. To put this in perspective with the other energy efficiency programs that are in place right now, Brad, you can correct me if I'm wrong, we've got extensions effectively with each one of our investor-owned utilities through the rest of this year and 2023, and which aligns everybody up for portfolio programs and applications for the calendar year 2024 moving forward. So everybody's effectively aligned, at the moment in terms of timing, which also presents a unique situation from a filing standpoint. So, I would say that we're on, knock on wood, we're on pretty good grounds right here in terms of, collaborative discussions, and hopefully we can maintain that momentum. I know Spire, Missouri is in for a rate case, but at least speaking for myself, I don't anticipate energy efficiency being much of an issue in that rate case. So those programs should be, I would assume stable, moving forward. I had asked each of the utilities if they would to go ahead and present a little bit about their experiences to date with their PAYS program. And then as sort of a precursor to open up discussions as we lead it into the larger presentation about PAYS moving forward. So without further ado, Lorene, I'm going to go ahead and select you first with Ameren, Missouri, if you're prepared to go ahead and do a presentation.
Yes, just give me 1 second here to get that open because not as familiar with
the WebEx, right?
WebEx, so but I see the link, so the button, so it should work. Just 1 second here.
Yeah, for those that are getting ready to present following Lorene, it's a square button with an arrow that allows the share content.
Mm-hmm.
Here we go.
Okay.
Yeah, we can see it. Right?
Great. So first, let me give a little disclaimer. Lorene Wellickson, I'm Senior Consultant, Energy Efficiency Evaluation and Strategy. So I help manage our evaluation of the program. So my focus is going to be on our PY21 results. If you have any specific questions on, how things are going in PY22, I won't be able to answer that. Jeff Berg would be the right person for that. He is on vacation coming back tomorrow. So, if there's any questions related to that, I will write them down and ask Jeff tomorrow and get answers back to you. Okay, so some results, participation summary of results from PY21. So you can see here, we started with 1,000 people interested, and they go through each of the tiers. And so you see the level of participation drops from one tier to the next, with the end result being there were 66 customers that completed tier 3 projects in 2021, which was 6% of the people who had originally expressed interest in the program. That caused us some concern. We wanted to know why so many people were dropping out before completing a tier 3 project. So a big part of our evaluation focus was on those customers. Because it was only the first year of the program and because PAYS wasn't in the original evaluation budget, we did have a pretty limited evaluation in 21. We didn't really do much of any impact evaluation. It was focused on process, and a big part of it was why are people dropping out. Still a summary of what kind of people are participating. These, again, are those 66 people that completed tier 3 projects. You can see the majority were electric heating customers. That makes sense for 21. We were focused on all electric customers. We didn't have co-delivery. We didn't have the all fuels rule. So you see a heavy emphasis on all electric customers. That was our target market was the electric customer. You can see almost everyone was an owner, just one renter. And then there's a little bit of information on copay. So 30% of the participants did not require a copay. 46 had a copay. So of the ones that were required to have a copay, the average was about $2,900. So we did, I said there wasn't much impact evaluation. We, basically Opinion Dynamics used the deemed values from utility as the results. But you can see here, the electric savings we achieved 15% of the target on energy savings, only 4% on demand savings. And the financing goal, we only reached 7% of that. So we were pretty far below our goals for 2021. So Opinion Dynamics identified these barriers to participation in the tier 3. So they surveyed 12 people. So it's a pretty small survey, but 12 of what about 1,000. So it was a small survey. We are going to have a much broader evaluation in 22, both impact and process, including a lot more surveys. So you can see 7 people thought the energy savings were, relative to cost was a burden. So basically cost was too high. That also overall cost of the project. So I would lump those two together. The cost to the energy savings wasn't sufficient for those customers. 3 people didn't like the copay. And 2 didn't like the length. The length can go up to 12 years. We cap it at 12 years. The interest rate for most of 21 was 4%, so one person didn't like that, and then one other. And it does say people could identify multiple barriers, so that may not add up to 12, doesn't, but there were 12 people surveyed. Opinion Dynamics also asked people if they completed projects outside of PAYS. And here you can see 4 people said they completed all of the recommended projects outside of the PAYS program. 3 completed some, and then 2 had planned to complete. So that's kind of interesting that, that people are they finding better prices? Do they not like the financing terms? But that some of them are moving ahead with projects outside of pays. Opinion Dynamics gave us quite a few recommendations for improvement. The first one was minimizing copays through precise customer targeting and or moving forward with plans to incorporate gas measures. Well, we've done that in 22 with adding co-delivery. They said we need to manage the expectations. So apparently, the issue with people having a copay, they weren't expecting that. So we need to make sure our marketing materials explain the program a little better so people know they might have to pay a copay. They suggested that we do some tracking on the reasons why customers are abandoning their projects before, completing them in the tier 3. Consider target marketing among renter and landlord populations. You saw, only one person was a renter, everybody else owned their home. And also consider adding multifamily residences. I know that's something that came up in the RMI discussions. And follow up with people who receive an easy plan but don't move on to tier 3 to see if they want to install measures without financing through our other programs. So some of these measures, particularly the HVAC measures, we do offer through other programs. So if people don't want the financing, they could get the measure in another program. We did make some changes to pays either in late 21 or in 22. So the interest rate was reduced from 4% to 3%. We launched co-delivery with both Spire and Ameren Missouri Gas. And we now follow an all fuels rule. So I've included the language from the tariff there. So basically in 21, we could only count the savings from the electric savings in determining the copay and seeing if the project even passed the 80-20 rule where the 80% rule where savings have to cover 80% of the cost, and anything a cost above 80% is paid in that copay. So we've added all fuels, so now gas and propane can be included in that calculation. So hopefully these 3 changes will lead to a lot more projects in 22 and higher amounts financed through the program. If you want to read our evaluation reports, they're all available on EFIS. I put the docket number there for anybody who doesn't have that. And there's a lot more details there on what the impact was of the program, the energy and demand savings, and also a lot more information on the demographics of the people who participated. With that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Lorraine. I've actually got a question to start you off. If you wouldn't mind going back, I think it's slide number 2 or 3. It's got a breakdown of the numbers.
That one?
Yeah. So of the 1,048 that enrolled, do you have a sense of how many of those that enrolled were not able to move on to tier 1 because the savings just weren't there?
So I think moving on to tier 1, that's before we would even figure out those savings.
Okay.
That would be the people who.
So would that be half of them?
Yeah, half of them don't even move on to tier 1. So tier 1 visual inspection and receipt of direct installs. Let me check with Jeff Berg on that. I don't know if that means they never actually scheduled an appointment. They expressed interest and didn't schedule the appointment, or if there was some follow-up they needed after the tier 1. So let me verify that and get back to you on that. But
okay.
So the tier 2 is the people actually had the full home assessment, and that's where you would determine if those 80%.
Right.
So as you go from the 350 down to the 66, I think is probably what you were asking about. Although, there's a lot of reasons why people dropped out there. But if you want information on you know, did customers not meet the 80% or what those co-pays were? I can have Jeff give you some information on that as well.
Yeah, just a better understanding of, you know, if the enrolled, if the difference between the enrolled and the tier one is just, you know, those customers not. Well, I guess start there. I mean, what happened to the other 48% there? I mean, how did they fall off?
Okay.
And I guess we can go from there, but thanks.
You're
Any
welcome.
other questions for Lorraine from Ameren, Missouri? Okay. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Now I have to figure out how to get out of this.
I believe if you hit the share content button again, you should be able to exit out. Marty suggests looking for the stop button at the top of the screen.
You take over shares.
Yeah, if somebody could steal it back from me.
Yeah, I could try.
I don't know if it lets you. Yeah, if you hit share, it would have been.
Ah, there, I see, stop sharing. That should do it.
Oh, perfect. All right, thanks, Lorraine.
Thanks.
All right, well, next we're gonna have a presentation from Evergy. Brian, are you ready?
Yeah, hey everybody. Let me see if I can learn a little bit about the sharing technology here and get this shared as well.
Outstanding. We can
All
see
right.
it. Great.
Great. Okay, let me see if I can. All right, so what I'm presenting here is as part of our stipulation, and well, I guess it was technically an order and then a follow-on stipulation. We were to file a 6-month update on our pay-as-you-save pilot. And again, for everybody who doesn't know me, I'm Brian File. I'm a director in the products group here at Evergy, responsible for both energy efficiency and demand response programs, as well as some other utility customer-facing programs and efforts. But I'll give a little bit of an update here that we gave to stakeholders in April as we hit our 6-month mark. Our official launch, as you see on this slide, was in September of last year. And so we've got a few extra months after that. I'll try to add a little bit of color on that update as I go through here. But this is the update through April, at least, so you can kind of get a feel for some of the same numbers that you saw from Lorraine on their experience in the first year. So we were, tasked with providing a list of different outcomes as a function of the order, and so we'll run through all of these, but hit on some of the key drivers that you hear here. So I'll also try to provide a little bit of insights into what we think is opportunities or weaknesses as we go forward. I think that was a little bit of the question and answer that you were hearing there from the group that I think helps us all learn. So participation rates, obviously the easiest visual is the bar chart there on the right. It's kind of flipped of how Ameren had presented it, where we've got our completed installations at the top and interest form submissions at the bottom. We do have an extra tier in there from how we evaluate the steps for our participation. So you'll notice a little bit of difference there as you walk through. Interest form submissions is what we get electronically. Can be via phone, but most likely online as people submit their interest. Tier 1 is when we go through and do an assessment, make sure that we can reach them, have a meeting with them and talk about it, what's possible. We do actually do some direct installs at that point. Tier 2 is a full-blown energy audit, evaluating the building shell, understanding age of equipment and working through all the details there. We call Tier 3 as an easy plan delivered. And so that's where customers are eligible and have a facility or home that can be offered a pay-as-you-save tariff in the form of an easy plan. And then tier 4 is they've actually went through and delivered and had all the equipment installed and are now on the tariff. A couple things to note as you look across there. This is a point in time, as you might imagine. And so some of the processing that goes from one step to the next isn't always included. And we do see somewhat of a time delay from tier 3 to tier 4, just in getting the easy plan, going through the decision process, ultimately getting everything installed. So I'll just pause here, and this is going to be a little bit of a theme to the rest of the parts, but make a general comment. And I think what we saw in our first 6 months was we did quite a bit of marketing, which we'll have a slide on towards the end, and that really built the pipeline of leads fairly quickly. That honestly, the infrastructure in a 6-month period of time wasn't fully ready to work through all of the in-person touches, follow-ups, reports, contractors. So that's been an opportunity for us to continue to kind of build that infrastructure to deal with the throughput that we saw in the initial interest forms. So you see a little bit of that also in just the drop from the, in this case, it's the bottom part, but we usually call it the top of the funnel as the largest piece of the numbers there as people are interested. So a little bit of the details on the right there, or excuse me, on the left. We did target some LMI, low moderate income zip code areas. So we did get some, as a percentage of interest, pretty good interest from that sector as well, which we thought was good. At that point in time, we had a little bit of owner-renter balance of, we were trying to focus on a little bit of owner-renter balance that wasn't really there yet. We had one renter go through the process. I think now we're somewhere closer to like maybe 5% renters. As a reminder, they obviously have to go through and get owner approval for that. So that's an extra step in the process. There, just at the point in time, we had more projects scheduled for install. Some of the barriers, there's a little bit of asbestos. Some of the gas leaks was maybe not necessarily just for clarity, nothing to do with Spire, but just people's internal home systems. They need to make sure everything's tight and ready to work through there. A little bit of mold, but we're also trying to make sure we can connect with our KC Lilac program, which most of you are familiar with, is our ability at low income leadership assistance collaborative, making part of that one touch. So that's something that we continue to try to work through to make sure that is working smoothly. And then co-pays, and this is something that's probably worth talking about. You heard a little bit from Laureen. With no co-pays, it makes it a lot easier to sell. As you see, 93%. When there's a co-pay, that drops our acceptance rate down and has continued to do that. We've continually seen co-pays being a bigger part of the math to make the 80%, 20% rule work. Some of that we think has to do with the cost of equipment in our region and the market there that we're trying to see how we can influence. But it definitely has been a trend thus far in our experience. A little bit more about the projects that had closed through March. We had a little over $300,000 worth of tariffs, projects financed. Average project size you see there pretty similar across our jurisdictions. And we had a few large projects, a few small, but that 2,000 to 5,000 tend to be the biggest. Weatherization, definitely the largest driver of the measures, as you see on the right there. Smart thermostat tends to be an easier one. The HVAC measure is one that we tend to struggle with when it starts coming into the copay math, as we've experienced in the first 6 to 9 months here as we've gone through. So that's an opportunity for us to continue to kind of evaluate when those make the most sense. Overall satisfaction, generally pretty good across the surveys here that we had through that far. Again, once they get the project done, the scores go up considerably from 8.2 just at the post-assessment phase to the post-installation phase. So they're excited to have this making their home more efficient and being able to manage through their bill. At the point in time, again, at the end of March, we really had this backlog of homes that we've continued to work through. So that was part of our effort, really push to continue to get more feet on the street through the e-utility implementation team and build out our trade ally network to get the projects completed. We did launch with Spire in April-ish. I'm sure Shailene will talk a little bit more about the combined effort that we've gone through, learning a little bit more on kind of which homes make the most sense and how the math works out on a co-delivery. As maybe most of you know, we have some arrangements related to how we deal with the percentage of savings, and that translates to the percentage of the tariff going on each individual utility. Not really any insight yet on utility financials. We have always been at the 3% interest rate per our original stipulation. So that's continued. We haven't had a ton of feedback on that necessarily, but that's something that we can keep from customers, something we can keep an eye on. And then our cost effectiveness and full evaluation won't be done until after this 2022 evaluation period. Just a couple quick things on who's participating and some of the marketing we've done. Again, we had really positive experience in terms of interest right away. And this is a little bit into what we saw as we saw the demographics of that interest. Something to learn from here. Generally it's across different income ranges. Homes being built fairly before 1981, that tended to be a insight that I thought was valuable for us as we think about home age as a driver for potential for retrofits and upgrades. That makes sense, right? But we saw that prove out in the data. And then, again, household size, these are multiple occupant homes you see there on the top, which tends to drive a lot of energy savings and just the fact that there's two folks or more in the home and the energy that they can save that way. And I think that was it for our presentation from then. Open to questions or thoughts from that.
Thanks, Brian. Any questions for Evergy?
Brian, this is Brad with staff. I apologize if you mentioned and I missed it, but do you have a sense of what the average copay was for those that needed to pay the copay?
Yeah, I don't believe we included that in here. I'll have to get back with you on that number. Yeah, I believe this, and I can confirm the project size is usually just the tariff size. But I've just anecdotally, I've seen, hundreds to thousands as copays of this for various projects. And honestly, I think that's worth digging into a little bit more, just considering, if a customer has, hundreds to thousands ready to invest, they probably feel better that it's not, 6,000 or 7,000, but it still is a certain type of customer that has those dollars available. So as opposed to someone who may be truly trying to get, free cash flow right from day one. So it's a little bit of a different participant profile there. But I can follow up with you on that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Brian, with those copay participants, are you finding that they're the result of measures that are outside the traditional installation process?
I wouldn't say so. I think what I've seen, and probably could get some correlated numbers on this, is effectively once you introduce HVAC, there's a good chance there's going to be a copay depending on what was installed before. If it's electric strip heat, maybe not. But if it isn't, then likely to be a copay is my, again, observational experience thus far. But we could probably get some numbers to support that.
Okay. The next question I'd have is, in your 6 months that you've had the program in place, have you seen any price shifts in the overall cost of the measures, particularly on the HVAC side?
Know that I have any trends on like, contractor bids for various parts of these measures, as you see on the right here. What I've just anecdotally heard, and probably utility has more data on this, is what they see across the different jurisdictions of the state. It can be fairly regional and even sub-regional in terms of pricing. And so they've observed that our market tends to be a little bit higher, which makes an impact on the 80/20 math for the tariff and the easy plans. So whether or not, with inflation and other things maybe you're alluding to, I haven't quite got any analysis on that impacting in the last 6 months, but I'm imagining it has been at some level. I just don't have any data on it.
Fair enough. Thanks for the insights, Brian. Any other questions for Brian here? Okay. We'll pass the mic on over to Spire, Missouri. Shanlon, you ready to present?
Yeah, and we won't be as in depth as some of the others because we're still kind of getting off the ground with everything. But let me pull this up for you.
We can see it.
Okay, let me move some of this stuff out of my way though. All right, so this first slide that I have up is really just the timeline for Spire because this actually took a little bit of time as far as getting pays off the ground. So we actually awarded some of the work back in July. So, the contract negotiations actually took us quite a bit of time, August through September, and maybe even spilled into October a little bit. Then we really jumped into some program discovery and onboarding process once we finally got over that hurdle. The biggest piece there, the whole time, we've been doing a lot of different things on the marketing plan side. So Spire's been in talks with Ameren and Evergy since the beginning, even a little bit of talks with Liberty at this point as well. So there's probably more that we could share on the marketing side that I didn't have a chance to throw in here for today because we've been dealing with some other things, but I want to make sure we presented something here. That soft launch and testing, we thought originally that would be about February is when we would soft launch and be about ready to go. But that really spilled over into April, as I think you heard Brian speak to earlier. So really our soft launch and that full launch really started to kick off about mid-May to early June is when we started putting out the press releases and things of that nature, website, everything live, all the testing on the back end to kind of move this program forward had been done. So we felt good about that full launch. The next slide. This is really just that customer journey that I think you've heard Ameren and Evergy both speak to as far as the home visits, the in-depth energy analysis, the easy plan, and the direct install. What we're seeing so far, and we'll share some brief numbers for today's conversation. We're definitely seeing some of the tier 1s, 2s, and 3s. We just yet to see, a direct install at this point. And that's something that we'll probably be talking with both Ameren and Evergy about. Our activity looks a lot stronger as far as our efforts with the Evergy side. And I think that's due to some of their marketing efforts. I think we're also approaching some things and talking with Ameren's marketing team. So I think we'll see a lot there soon as well. But most of our numbers, I believe, are more correlate more with our efforts on the west side of the state. So kind of getting into these early numbers for us right now, you're seeing a total of 430 enrollments, direct installs 271, 221 assessments, and then easy plans created. We're seeing 140 created, and then This other easy plans, we're trying to really understand what our conversations with e-utility, what this really means, because we, again, haven't seen any true plans go all the way through yet, because we've been waiting to test our system with that financing mechanism and how everything's built in our CCNB. So we haven't got one through the full process yet. We're expecting some. And this kind of leads me to some of the discussions we've been having with e-utility. And they're really around Paysport, understanding that more, because we pulled this out today. But there's a couple things that we've asked for some additional access on that it doesn't seem like we can get into to really quantify all the numbers. But it sounds like they're working on that and hoping to have that resolved today, so we can kind of get into those details more. But this is an early snapshot of where we've been, and you'll see that around June is when things really start to take off for us for a moment, even though there's been a slight pullback in July so far. But June is when we really start putting out those press releases, a couple things on social media, our marketing efforts, again, with some of the things we learned from some of the other utilities that had launched prior. And then I just kind of stopped here, Jeff, for today, really just to kind of have more of a discussion as far as any questions individuals might have for us. One other thing before I open to those questions, I would say, is with Spire, the biggest thing for us was really trying to figure out how to work with all our partners in different areas, right? With Evergy, with Ameren, hoping to work with Liberties here pretty soon as well. And, there are always challenges there, like on the back end and making sure things line up and really walking through those processes. I think that we've got through a lot of those pieces now. So we're more focused on e-utility and pushing that relationship for us to, to actually see the results of individuals installing some of the equipment. To Brian's point, and I think Lorraine's point earlier, when it comes to the copays, we don't really have those details yet, but we thought once we came into the program, it would help with some of that, since Spire was taking on some of that for the customer as well. But we're not far enough in our understanding of all the reporting and Paysport to really, speak effectively to that yet, because I like to have the numbers first. But that's kind of been our experience so far with the program.
Thanks, Shaylin. Appreciate the insights. I'll open it up for questions. Any questions for Spire, Missouri? Okay. We're going to pivot now and go to presentation over next steps. I mean, what we've been given here, again, this is just speaking for myself, sort of a mixed bag of results in our first year. But my first impressions, the numbers are a little rough, to say the least. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. But, for a program to be scaled up, across the state like this, the number of auditors, touch points, I'm just going to try to articulate some of the reasons I think I heard from the different utilities. Health and safety hazard issues, copays were clearly an issue. And I think, what Shaylin did a great job of really visualizing for me was how much of a difference having Spire in this makes this program. You can see, the touch points and the numbers increase exponentially just by bringing that copay down. One thing that I don't think the energy efficiency guys get enough credit for, and for the utilities here, is really just an understanding of the psychological barrier that confronts a homeowner in saying, well, I want to go ahead and drop several $1,000s or $5,000 or $7,000. This is a lot of money. And the PACE program itself is not the most intuitive thing at first blush. So nobody said this was going to be easy. We recognize moving forward that getting those deep savings beyond light bulbs really does require a harder sales pitch. And I think that's bearing out with the numbers that we're seeing. Other things that occurred during this time, not to mention just COVID-19, issues with inflation, supply chain constraints, but really a credit to the utilities in terms of moving forward and adapting. The all fuels rule, co-delivery models, even the easy pay method. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and move to our next presentation, which is going to be from me. So hopefully everybody can see this. If I can get a confirmation from somebody.
Yes, we could.
All right. Thanks.
Hey, Jeff, this is Jeff Keeble. I'm trying to follow along. Are you following the agenda or are you skipping around?
I think I'm skipping around, Jeff.
Okay. Are you the outside speaker to be determined?
Yes, the outside speaker had to cancel because of the change of date.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
filling in for that outside speaker, Jeff.
Okay. That's no problem for me. I just was curious. Thanks.
Edward Yin from ACEEE sends his regrets for not being able to be here. So, pay statewide model discussion, and cueing the Beach Boys theme here. Little disclaimer before we start, the comments on work product are my own and don't necessarily reflect any position of the Missouri Office of Public Counsel. So, again, just my own high level thoughts. I think it helps to look at this, first on a macro level, current state of affairs. Missouri is unique in that we are not a state that has an energy efficiency standard or target, a specific target that's tied in Missouri. There are no residential building energy codes or commercial energy codes or appliance efficiency standards. So, right off the bat, very unique relative to most states in the United States. At a high level, what can you draw from that conclusion? That there should be a lot of potential energy savings within Missouri because the structures themselves aren't having to be built to a certain standard or code or typically not enforced at that level. It also helps, there's been a number of discussions about co-pays and the overall cost of products, and that quite often, as a pays recipient goes through this process, it's not cost effective or they fall out for any number of reasons. That 80-20 rule, and that 80-20 rule is important to remember here in that there are a number of different on-bill financing tools available. Our office, other interveners supported the pays model because it was a very conservative model in how those measures are promoted. And I say conservative, if anybody had been following, a lot of the headlines that PACE, received over this past year, particularly in Missouri, that would be, a handful of bad actors that were very liberal in their energy savings and targets. So why do I bring all of that up? At a macro level moving forward, I'm fairly confident that the price of electricity is going to increase. Now, why do I say that? I'm just going to cite to some filings. In Evergy West, we'll look at their 5-year PISA investment plan comparison year over year. The most recent plan that was filed in 2022 is looking at almost a 200% increase from its original plan in 2019. That's $2 billion in planned investment. That's not even touching, generation investment. For Metro, over 100% increase in its 5-year plan. These are all costs that are going to be borne by ratepayers and effectively going to increase the cost of service. For Liberty Utilities, In their 2019 case, their total rate base adjusted test year was approximately $1.5 billion. Their PISA filed investment capital project plan over the next 5 years was $2 billion. It's a 138% increase off their existing rate base. For Ameren, Missouri, most recently, they filed IRP. What you have here is a visual of planned generation resource additions and retirements. At the top end of this graph, you see is various renewables, solar, wind, and in 2031, a 1,200 megawatt gas combined cycle plant. At the bottom, not one, not two, but 4 baseload generation plants of capacity being lost over the next 8 years. What's important to note from this is that the additional renewables are not accredited capacity. So at a MISO level, you're getting 50%, 20% of the actual generation accredited to meeting their capacity needs. So significantly less. So on one hand, you definitely have a reduction in carbon emissions. On the other hand, there's, I think, reasonably a very big concern as to reliability issues moving forward. But all of this is going to cost a lot of money. So what's the takeaway? Costs are increasing for ratepayers. Storm Uri-like events, well over $200 million for Empire, $360 million for Evergy West. And reliability concerns overall have increased and are likely going to be more the norm than the exception. Migrating to a more carbon-free future that ensures proper reliability is going to require an increased emphasis on least cost planning. And I would be remiss if I just didn't hit home the opportunity costs that face each one of the utilities and stakeholders moving forward as we look for just and reasonable rates for ratepayers. There's only a finite amount of money, a finite amount of time. Every decision has a cost, and even the decision to not make a decision has a cost. Stated differently, you know, I've often say that we can probably solve just about any problem, but trying to solve all of the problems is where we end up with a problem, having an issue. So challenges with DSM historically, and this is a non-exhaustive list, include what are we deferring? Historically, most of our utilities have been very long on capacity. That dialogue is starting to change and change rapidly. Most ratepayers have to pay into the program. The sole exception tend to be industrial customers that are exempt per the statute. But most ratepayers do not participate, or at least don't participate at a meaningful level because they do not have disposable capital, which is really the impetus behind our office exploring the PACE program. This is especially true for renters and low-income households. And consequently, demand-side management can become a regressive policy and is often the first on the chopping block when rates get too high. So first impression of PACE in operation. And, you know, again, hats off to each of the utilities for presenting what you did. I think gave us a really, really good overview of first impressions. On a positive, I'd like to say that within a year's span, we managed to bring together co-delivery and cost allocation. Again, the utilities were able to come to various memorandums of understanding with each other. We had 4 out of the 5 utilities with approved tariffs have program offerings. The interest rate is now uniform across the board at 3%. And you have program certainty through at least 2023 with opportunity for real cost savings moving forward. The challenges, on the other hand, are deep. Scaling up across the state to meet demand has proven a challenge. And I think, just being honest, that has most definitely been a problem in having, you know, customers wait in the queue and getting the needed touch points across. Outside externalities like COVID-19 that, largely out of our control, inflation and supply chain constraints, number of auditors, as I mentioned earlier, and then different incentive models in place across the utilities. Have all proven to be somewhat of a challenge at different points. As we move forward, it would help to consider what does the empirical literature say on this so far. Ameren, Missouri was required to do a market potential study and to look at what sort of opportunities exist for pays moving forward. Here's a figure, and again, this is all public information. This is a figure of a single family baseline consumption profiles. Below what you see is a breakdown in various segments according to customer fuel type and housing stock. So this varies between, single family, well, it's all single family homes, but it varies between, good, poor, adequate, and solid foundation. And then natural gas customers, electric space heating customers, electric furnace customers, and heat pumps. And what you'll note is that the vast majority of Ameren customers are also natural gas customers. The early phases of pays is really going to, and all the literature in this bared it out with Lorraine's presentation, is that it really, for the most cost-effective scenarios, it's really being played out with electric space heating customers. Co-delivery has since evened out that playing field. Wrong way. By segment, you can see the breakdown as follows. So whole building potential is significant from the market potential study at that single family electric and multifamily electric. And it obviously gets much more, difficult moving forward if that house is secure and whether or not the issue of copay plays a part in that or not. And again, this is to be expected. This is a very conservative program. The 80-20 is designed to make sure that those savings actually materialize. Again, breakdown by copay. Moving forward, estimated savings are considerable. Roughly 304,000, of the qualifying customers, or well over 90% of the customers, within that 0% copay, looking at significant annual average savings. Important, and I don't want to stress too much on this. I think the RMI discussion's got a little off kilter with the task at hand, but the issue of this being an attractive option for low-income customers, for low-income renters in particular, I think this graph does a really good job of showing where the sweet spot is and not, for particular customers. The GDS study makes a point of saying effectively that target population right here, anything below that is effectively a more appealing number, whereas anything above this is going to be more attractive to, for example, Evergy's Casey Lilac program, low-income weatherization, and so forth. Importantly, what the study did say moving forward is that 17% of the forecasted sales in the residential sector and 8% of the sales in the low-income sector encompass the long-term pays potential. Those are significant savings for a program to capture. And especially when you consider that this study is looking at as a standalone entity, Ameren by itself. Of course, some of these savings probably represent part of what is captured in RAP, and the incremental potential that addresses financing constraints and increases the total willingness of participants to participate of customers. Homes with a high energy burden but not excessive are the best candidates for pays because of the availability of financing to help overcome financial barriers to participate. Again, not to beat this to death, but there's a donut hole, effectively that is appealing for participants in this. And those on one side of it, if we'll put it stated differently, if there's an option for free weatherization, that should always be, the first move, as opposed to paying a 3% interest on something. Importantly, one of the things that was brought up in the GDS study was the issue of replace on failure discussion. And we've had this discussion a couple of times with stakeholders. To quote the study, another topic to consider going forward that was not a focus of this study is leveraging of an on-bill financing model to cover the cost of HVAC equipment in a replace on fail scenario. In that scenario, the customer is looking to replace a failed unit. The customer will purchase an HVAC measure of some efficiency level, regardless of a program intervention. Thus, the program intervention helps move the customer to an incrementally more efficient unit. This is a huge situation. And I'm preaching to the choir here, but something like more than 75% of all HVAC replacements are because of failure. Basically, people are not looking to replace their HVAC until it's no longer operational. And every time that those HVACs go down, you're effectively missing an opportunity to move a customer to a more efficient unit. Now, this runs in contrast to how we have historically looked at EM&V and savings. As the GDS report points out, it creates an example. While the customers would finance the full measure cost, a standard analysis would only consider the incremental cost and the incremental savings relative to the but-for baseline. Whether or not this replacement on failure becomes part of the PAYS discussion is something that I'd like to tee up for discussion. Quite frankly, if there's an opportunity to really move to Energy Star efficient HVACs at a level as opposed to the baseline level, the PAYS model would seemingly provide a real appropriate venue to do that. That's a game changer for each one of your MIA portfolios. But there's a give and take there. In contrast, and this is just to say how things operate today, effectively the savings are too small to satisfy the terms of the PAYS program if done by itself. So what's happening here? What you have is a number of customers that are leaving savings on the table. They're, instead of doing the PAYS program, instead of doing a home audit, they are looking to get a baseline HVAC unit in place after failure. And we talked a little bit about this in terms of the Fast Pass concept. Moving forward, what did we learn from the RMI insight? For myself, probably the most illuminating thing was the program administrator 2x2 matrix. Today, at Ameren, Evergy, Spire, and soon to be Liberty all operate in this utility service provider model, where each individual utility is moving forward with their own siloed program. It has moved somewhat into a governing board model insofar as that we've got co-delivery because of Spire. And again, a credit to Spire in being able to go ahead and work with not one, but all of the electric utilities and trying to manage that. The decentralized model would take that a step further and include issues like branding across the state in a different governing model entirely. Moving up, other options include having a state agency take control of the program or a third-party nonprofit. We're going to discuss these in a little bit more detail, and this is where we got some insight from ACEEE. So risk for PAYS at scale. Moving outside of that individual siloed model, what are the risks? I think the most obvious one is just billing and cost allocation. If there was to be a statewide pays model, it would still have to go through an Ameren bill, an Evergy bill, a Spire bill. And I rightly would understand any utility being concerned about, what costs are actually being portrayed on their bill. There would be a degree of program control that would be surrendered potentially by each utility. Potentially time consuming, legislative or regulatory changes. And quite frankly, the cost could outweigh the benefits. If the numbers don't materialize, this could really be an exercise in madness. However, the opportunities are potentially appealing. Economies of scale in marketing, program administration, trade ally outreach, and collective bidding. Those are all costs that could collectively bring measures into households at a much more cost-effective manner. Opportunity for outside capital to support the program. Last year, we had the Department of Energy, U.S. Department of Energy provide a presentation on outside capital financing and effectively, laid out as Missouri being a candidate for outside capital. This would be appealing for all parties concerned. Utilities get to, free up their own capital and move that towards projects in their PISA or generation mix. Also at scale, from a regulatory standpoint, it would make things easier on our end and the PSC's end. Right now, a lot of duplicative programs and oversight just requires lots and lots of bureaucratic paperwork. The opportunity for increased participants. Moving forward, the idea is that this could even be expanded to include cooperative and municipal utilities. And all of this would result in a decrease in cost, shared expenses, with significant energy and demand savings. So let's look at the different models. The advantages of a utility administrative program historically have just been what we do today is that they're well recognized and generally trusted by customers. That they provide a direct and routine customer contact with established relationships. That the organization is structured to serve a large number of customers and manage necessary resources. The potentially good fit for energy services that would include customer energy efficiency and which can clearly fit a utility business model. Shareholder incentives are aligned with energy savings objectives and customer outcomes, or effectively what we know today as MIA. Utilities definitely benefit from having the direct, easy access to customer accounts. One of the big selling points of PAYS is that utilities should be able to cherry pick which customers are most likely to benefit from a PAYS program based off their historical usage. Utilities also have generally in-house experts and are part of a well-established market, meaning that it can be much more stable and less political than non-utility structures. The advantages of a non-utility administration include generally have a single purpose organizational objective, save energy. Statewide programs can yield greater consistency and better coordination. Statewide programs provide better economies of scale of marketing and relationships with key stakeholders and market actors. Non-utility administration eliminates the potential for internal business conflicts, i.e., how can a utility promote both energy efficiency measures and energy, load programs where you're increasing consumption. This effectively takes it out of the hands of that inherent conflict. Non-utility program administrators can become trusted independent authority. There's no mixed motives. We're here to serve you, and save you energy, period. So demand side management administered program designs. This is a old map. I believe it's from 2011. So some of these states have changed. But the large dark blue patterns that you see are effectively states in which utilities administer their own programs. States that are colored, either with stripes or green, include some form of non-utility administration. The most notable include the following, and they vary. I'm not going to read each one for you, but they vary in scope and intensity. Efficiency Vermont, New York Energy Smart Program, Energy Trust of Oregon, so on. We're going to be discussing some of these. In fact, most of these are nonprofit models. Some involve a governing board, and in some cases, you actually have the state energy office entrusted with it. So disadvantages to a third party. It takes time to build the infrastructure. You can't create new organizations and corresponding capabilities to administer and implement programs overnight. This is a slow process. And I think even at the utility side, the three PowerPoints that we saw before this bear that out. Changes in contractors can be disruptive. Customer data and account information may not be readily accessible and available. And structure and funding can be less stable and more subject to the political winds. First example I'd like to show you is the Oregon Energy Trust, the Energy Trust of Oregon. It's a nonprofit independent agency that's funded by 4 separate utilities in the state of Oregon and encompasses about 75% of the entire customer base of the state. It's governed by a volunteer board of directors with 3 advisory councils, and it's overseen by the PSC in Oregon. Most recently, the funding of it comes from a surcharge called the public purpose charge, which is created by statute. That's historically been 3% of the utility revenues, but it's changed to 1.5 in 2021. Efficiency Vermont is a third-party nonprofit model. And it's operated by the Vermont Energy Investment Corporation. It's also regulated by the state's PUC. Again, it's primarily funded through a ratepayer surcharge, although they also obtain additional funds through the ISO New England Forward Capacity Market as an energy resource. That's largely on the demand response side. And they receive funding through RGGI, which is the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative that goes towards thermal efficiency programs. Efficiency Maine Trust operates in very much the same fashion as Vermont, insofar as where they get their funding sources from. It's unique in that it does incorporate a governing board of trustees. And those are actually appointed by the governor and overseen by the Maine PUC. In Hawaii, Hawaii transitioned from a utility-run program to a state-wide third-party administered program in 2009. Hawaii's programs have been around since the 1990s. Prior to that, so it's roughly 20 years of state-run or utility-run programs. It includes the HECO utilities, which is Hawaiian Electric, Maui Electric, and Hawaii Electric Light, as well as the cooperative electric company in Hawaii. This was a result of an energy efficiency resource standard and that was implemented in 2009. So effectively, the state required a certain number of savings that needed to be met. Going a little bit more into Hawaii, the challenges that those utilities faced and customers faced is that was some of the highest electric rates in the country. The legislative changes I mentioned before created a public benefits fund. It also decoupled demand side management programs from rate proceedings. So as a combination of the renewable standards and the renewable energy standards, overall categorical change in how electric utilities were operating and offering these programs. It was mirrored through by a PSC order that detailed concerns over the inherent conflict between utility objectives to sell more electricity as a means of increasing profit and the DSM goal of encouraging customers to use less electricity. The order went on to emphasize long life measures, a reduced emphasis on CFLs, an increased role of community sponsorship, an increased focus on geographic equity, and transitioning from an ex post multi-year evaluation to an ex ante estimate with full annual verification, a formative analysis, and a market assessment. Included in the initial RFP to attract vendors to the program included a set of scoring criteria comparing relative cost and impacts, as well as bidder experience and track records. Program included a 4-year contract, was based off the total resource cost test, with an emphasis on maximizing electric and peak demand savings, and broad participation across customers, with an emphasis on overcoming market barriers and transforming end-use markets. Notably, the performance incentive was also capped for this program. What were the first year results? Well, it was simplified effectively. We had 4 residential programs and 3 commercial programs. And the EM&V largely stayed the same. Notable differences in 2010 was a comparison of accomplishment of program potential was removed, and non-participant emphasis was taken off from telephone surveys. In its place was an increase in focus groups and economic effects of energy efficiency. And this relates back to that equity initiative that was put forward. So 4 utilities went from having their individual siloed programs to all of the utilities offering these same 7 programs across the board. And the results were largely impressive. And I don't have the 2010 results. I put up the wrong one. I apologize for that. I'll have to redo that. All right. Mass Save. I don't know if you probably can't make that out with a black background, but this is a Massachusetts program. It's a decentralized state program. Mass Save was preceded prior to Mass Save's existence. There were 25 years of electric and 15 years of gas demand side management programs in Massachusetts. And if you know anything about ACEEE scores, you'll know that Massachusetts is either number 1 or number 2 of ACEEE best ranked states. It's usually Massachusetts or California every year. In 2008, the Green Communities Act was passed to go ahead and capture economies of scale and minimize customer confusion and maximize cost effectiveness. What Mass Save is a brand. So each of the utilities that are under this umbrella brand are still administering their programs like usual, but there are cost savings coming from uniformity in marketing, in outreach, in evaluations across the board that are savings passed on to customers, as well as collective bidding on measures themselves. The question I had asked Brian File earlier today was related to whether or not there were any issues with specific measures and inflation. And I think Brian's response was that that e-utility had noticed considerable variation across the subregions in Missouri. In Massachusetts, for example, what you've got is collective bidding across that state, which allows for cheaper measures. So in Mass Save, it's sponsored by each utility. It's supported by the Massachusetts Department of Energy Resources and an Energy Efficiency Advisory Council. It synchronizes program offerings, delivery models, application forms, and marketing plans. It's made up of 11 voting members with representatives from ratepayers, large commercial, low income, labor, energy efficiency experts, the environmental community, and from specific state government agencies. Those are all voting members of Mass Save. And 13 non-voting members, which include the various program administrators from each of the utilities, their contractors, and the municipal aggregators. Open, transparent monthly meetings, The EEAC, the Energy Efficiency Advisory Council, hires a technical consultant to work through program level analysis and review. The program administrators focus on achieving individual goals with each utility. And the model looks something like this. Individual stakeholders, program administrators, ratepayer, policy, all of this effectively makes that Energy Efficiency Advisory Council, works with a council consultant and passes that off to the program administrators as they manage both project goals moving forward. What you have is uniformity in bidding. What you have is uniformity in marketing, shared responsibility and evaluation. Importantly, this has huge advantages for any sort of economies of scale is really going to help smaller utilities. This is in Missouri, this would definitely help customers like ratepayers in Liberty, Liberty ratepayers, as well as municipal and cooperative customers as well. So successes and challenges. Success included cost savings through the residential home energy service audit and the creation of a technical assessment committee, shared staffing and resources, and considerable savings from commercial upstream lighting. Challenges in the initial phrasing, it did include branding and getting a consistent message across. The consistency of systems and data. This is obviously going to be any challenge in a statewide program, and a need to set concrete baselines from which to measure success. So, discussion. Is there a path forward away from the utility service provider model? Sitting here today, I think there is. And I think there is definitely worth having a discussion about this. Let me go ahead and I'll finish up the PowerPoint before we open this up to discussion, given our time. I'd like to propose that the hypothetical, remember we'll go through each of these four options here of what that might look like in a Missouri model. So the hypothetical state agency model, this would be having something like the Division of Energy oversee a program. Importantly, what I'd like to suggest here is that the Mass Save model looked at programs across the board for each of the utilities. It was consolidating each of the utilities into specific programs that were universal across the state of Massachusetts for cooperatives, for municipals, for investor-owned. Whether or not we get to that level of Missouri, I don't think we're at that dialogue at this point, but looking at this as a pilot project or something just from a PAYS perspective makes a lot of sense to me. Under a state agency model, that would most definitely require some sort of legislative change to provide certainty in funding and continuity. In that state agency model, the state would work closely with e-utility as a consultant or a program advisor. And what I'd recommend is an RFP for program implementers. This would go out to your third-party groups like various different program implementers that you've got out there. From a utility perspective, this is just cutting a check and earning a return based off of the potential and the outcomes. It's fairly straightforward and would take a lot of the power outside of the utilities in terms of control. On the flip side, it would take a lot of that responsibility and pressure away. The funding stream, perhaps the most attractive thing under the statewide model would be a clear cut and connection between funding from potential outside sources, namely the federal government, and it can complement existing activities that exist. So if you know anything about Missouri Division of Energy, they are effectively a check writing agency. There's lots and lots and lots of money that comes down from the federal government and is expected to come down here over the next couple of years. So this would be a way to leverage those funds. Importantly, there would still be PSC oversight in terms of regulatory approval and cost allocation. The third-party model represents a departure from that state model. In this example, we'd set out an RFP for a third-party program administrator. This would be no different than Vermont Efficiency and Maine Efficiency Collaborative, or even to a certain extent, the Oregon Trust. You'd have a third-party administrator, and that contract could either go through the PSC, which is how it's traditionally done, or through the Division of Energy. This too would probably require some sort of legislative change, or at least regulatory change, to ensure continuity. Again, you'd work with the utility as a consultant and program advisor. Utilities could cut a check and earn a return based on potential and outcomes. Funding streams from federal government can complement other activities. Everything that you could be done under the state energy model, I think, could easily be done under the nonprofit third-party model as well, and has been done in other states. And again, PSC oversight in terms of regulatory approval and cost allocation. One option in Missouri would be to still incorporate a state agency. In this case, it would most likely be the Environmental Improvement and Energy Resource Authority for federal funding. And I had mentioned before that this would require some legislative changes. I think less so. I'll put it that way. And I think the legislative change that you might have to incorporate with something like this would be opening up for a green bank option. I know there'd been, discussions about that in the past. It becomes a lot easier if we've got some certainty that federal funds would be coming down. The governing board model is the mass save model, and I got to be honest, at this point, might be the most appealing one to me. Under the governing board model, effectively what we're talking about is just rebranding. And instead of rebranding, statewide across all programs like Mass Save, we would be rebranding one program, PAYS. In this example, I threw out the, Missouri Show Me Savings program as an option. An RFP for a program design and governing structure. What do I mean by this? Really just hiring a third party to help draft up rules and guidelines and make suggestions. And I feel like this is something that could get off the ground fairly quickly if there was consensus among all parties as to the best way moving forward. You take the current model that's already in place and you work on a statewide brand for uniformity in marketing, trade ally network standards, offerings, collective bidding, and ultimately, if agreed to, a fast pass option. Again, that's untapping that 75% or more market share that is going unrealized today in Missouri. Whether or not you would need legislative or regulatory changes, I think you would need some regulatory changes. But I think all of that is stuff that could lend itself to dialogue over the next 6 months. Keeping in line with the Mass Save model, again, this would have a board of directors, both voting and non-voting. And the idea is really that RFP for a program design would help flesh out the to-do list for utilities and implementers to look at. Importantly, all four models and the governing board model is going to have PSC oversight in terms of regulatory approval and cost allocation. And again, incorporating the EIERA for federal funding. So at the end of the day, subtle but important differences between each of those three models. So discussion on models. Utility-led pays, governing board pays, state agency pays, third-party pays. We'll see this up here in a second. Outstanding issues that we should all be aware of. Timing. Right now, we're in a lull, effectively. I know each one of the utilities is effectively working on their portfolios moving forward. Assuming you have those portfolios are approved, or some variation of those portfolios are approved for the 2024 forward MIA cycles for each of the utilities, that gives us a year and a half to map out or have a firm discussion as to whether or not this is an option. And recognize that there's a give and take here. When I ring up the replacement on failure option, that's a huge give if we were to give it up from OPC's perspective, because that becomes a free rider issue, and that becomes an issue of, well, how much cost savings should be appropriate allocated to the utilities as a result of that. The only scenario where I see that as an option is if we have some alignment, some agreement on a fast pass and statewide model that brings down the overall cost. Is consensus possible? Well, I guess we're going to find out. And the goal with Stave's presentation, I don't want to put people on the spot if they're not comfortable with having a lot of dialogue about this. But definitely, if you do have thoughts, to raise them now. Absent that, and following today's conversation, we'll be reaching out to each of the utilities and stakeholders moving forward to see if there is some consensus moving forward on this, or keeping in mind with the opportunity cost slide that I put out at the very beginning. There's only a finite amount of time and energy and money. If this isn't worth going down or pursuing, then we need to cut our losses and move on to something else. So next steps, as I would propose, is for August and September to solicit some affirmation one way or the other from utilities. In how this would go about would be actually teeing up a description that would be laid out for each of the stakeholders for input in a follow-up conversation. If we were to move forward, we'd discuss whether or not there would need to be some legislative or regulatory changes depending on the model that we move forward with, and then meet up again with actionable items in September and October. And then again, part of this discussion, I think it's definitely worth having is that discussion about replace on failure. If I'm a utility, that alone should bring me to the table as part of the discussion. If you want to achieve meaningful savings on the energy efficiency side moving forward with these next couple of years, as we're looking at least cost resource planning and moving away from lighting, residential lighting, there needs to be deeper savings. So how do you achieve that? So I'll leave you with this note of herding cats and value proposition. For utilities, what would you be offering is some certainty. For regulators, efficiency. For consumers, cost savings. For environmentalists, clean energy. State Energy Office, fulfilling of their state mission objectives. This is also known as a win-win-win situation. All right, it's that rare combination that's rarely seen in regulatory proceedings. It's elusive. Might be able to capture it. Questions?
Hey, Jeff. Thanks for the presentation here. This is Philip with Renew Missouri. I just wanted to lift up that DE is working on an infrastructure bank, and there might be an opportunity for coordination if we're having a statewide model for pays and looking at using that for some financing options.
Could you provide a little bit more color on that, Philip? So like working on a statewide energy infrastructure bank, is that something that, does it have a deliverable date in mind or an operational date where that would be open?
I can't speak to that, but Jordan or Marty, can either of you, talk about that a little further from your end?
Hi, folks. Can you hear me okay? This is Jordan.
Yes, we can hear you, Jordan.
Hey, super. So we've been working with EIERA, and right now we're just at the point of having a memo of understanding between the two of us that we'd like to explore this together. We are still working on the details and, how this might come together, but we don't have anything that's official yet. We're just exploring the idea internally at the moment.
Okay. We'll take it. We'll take it. Sounds promising. With this, I mean, to the extent that you guys have this conversation, I'd recommend that you at least, throw out the option of whether or not a statewide PAYS program would complement, and I think it would, that infrastructure bank. But that might be worth having another discussion here in the near future.
I agree.
I'm going to go around and I'm just going to call out stakeholders here about, thoughts one way or the other about what's been presented. And if people do have a strong feeling one way or the other, to please say it now, so we can minimize these conversations to the extent possible. Lorraine, Jeff, I'm going to pick on you guys first since you guys are Ameren.
I think the one thing we've talked about in the past is how does this fit in with MIA, with each utility having an earnings opportunity, a throughput disincentive. I think that's always going to be our main concern there. As you probably know, I've been involved in a lot of discussions on early replacement and replace on fail. So looking forward to having even more conversations on that, because I do think yeah, I think there is sort of a disconnect on that side of it for PAYS. I think maybe if a customer is replacing their system right at failure, then maybe the current model works because the customer still sees the big savings compared to their old system that just failed. If you have a customer whose system failed 2 or 3 years ago, then that's when that throws off that model.
Right. Well, I was actually thinking of you when I was writing this early this morning. So I appreciate that, and it has not been lost on. I agree. Like each one of those models would need to fit in with your MIA objectives. All right, points taken. Brian or Natalie from Evergy.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Jeff. Appreciate the presentation and walking through a little bit more of your thought process there. Definitely have some familiarity with some of the other state models, not directly, but indirectly through the various associations and industry activities that we get involved in. So thanks for providing a little more clarity and color on how you think that could be discussed here. Generally speaking, I think maybe some of the technical details are interesting to us as well that Lorraine just hit on, related to the replace on fail question. I still don't have my mind wrapped around the math of how that works with the incremental or not and the 80-20, but that may just be somebody educate me a little bit on how that works. So that's, I think, if that's a separate session we get into, I think that would be interesting for us. Generally, though, back to kind of the model perspective, I think, MIA and how the interaction there plays is important for us as well. So I'll reiterate that point. And I think you made a good point, Jeff, in your slides, right? I mean, the transition of us, if this were to be administered, as a third party or a different organization, and then ultimately it is put on our customer's bill, and that connection is very important to us to understand and have oversight and make sure we're well in tune with what it is and what it, customers' interaction with that tariff on their bill. Obviously we do it today, but as the third party part, that's a little bit of, again, just transition. Not that I don't think it can be overcome. I think that's just something that, sticks out in my mind as something to think a little bit about.
I think that's valid. Yeah. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry. Last thing I'll say is just, I think we're really finding out also what is the real market potential and the sweet spot of customers here, right? I do agree with your points about obviously the part of the intent here is efficiency across the state and the scale value. I'm still not fully grasping on, again, the right sweet spot for this customer base, that doesn't have a copay, which makes it most cost effective for them, and is in the right home situation that doesn't have others health and safety issues or whatever, right? It gets a little bit, in my opinion, kind of detailed and weedy, that probably needs to be worked through. Again, I know there's at least one potential study out there, but that's something that I think consideration for the bigger group, right, is how big an effort to put is how big the market is, right, and who are we targeting for sure.
No, I think those are very valid points. Let me speak just a bit, my thoughts, my knee-jerk thoughts on some of what you said. I mean, the 80-20 incremental and the replace on fail, and how that math plays out. From my vantage point, so much of that is dependent on the cost of this overall program coming down as a result of economies of scale. So cost decreases in marketing, in program delivery, in being able to collectively bid on measures at a lower scale, and aligning trade allies with that. And then also, I'm operating under the assumption, like I said before, that we are just living in a world where everything is just getting more expensive. So the idea that, your electric bill is going to be increasing, your gas bill is going to be increasing because of increased infrastructure, and CapEx investments is not something that should surprise anybody at this point. So the combination of those things, should result in more cost-effective programs moving forward, in theory. As far as the billing issue is concerned, I've got the same concerns. The only thing that gives me comfort is, like, clearly it happens in Vermont and Wisconsin and Delaware and Oregon. So I don't think it's insurmountable. I don't know how to do it off the top of my head, but clearly other states and utilities have done that third-party model before. But the health and safety issue is a very real one, and one that will, I think, always be present in some form or another, in being able to hit this stuff. There's only so much that, these programs can do, right? Well, thanks for the insight. Nate, Hackney, Greg, any initial thoughts? I know you guys haven't had the opportunity to roll out your PACE program yet, but you've been knee deep in a lot of these discussions for quite a while now.
Hey, sure. Thanks for the opportunity, and yes, qualifying all that. I probably ought to put it on record. It goes without saying, but I'm gonna say it anyway. We have the same concerns about compatibility with MIA and all the full cost recovery built into that. I'll also footnote, for what it's worth, she's not on the call today. Kim is, our manager over the East and Central regions. And we are a party to mass saves. We're part of mass saves and involved in that daily and deeply. I am not. It's a lot of work in saw sharpening, but I think if and when conversations progress to that level, we'll have hopefully some additional insights as a member of mass saves. But yeah, basically echo all the concerns and all of the qualified optimism of our peer IOUs there. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Nate. Yeah, I think Kim is quite an asset in having worked in Mass Save quite a bit. Full disclosure, a couple weeks ago, I was definitely leaning towards a third-party nonprofit model, and I've definitely come much more around to the governing board model. I think it makes a lot of sense, and probably is the path of least resistance in terms of achieving a lot of the goals that are easily attainable, I think, at the end of the day. Shaylin, you and the Spire team, who's clearly a pivotal part in this PACE program. Any thoughts?
Yeah, and I think I'll end up going back through this, Jeff, and having you send out your presentation too. But I think for us, one, we don't have a MIA, right? So really thinking through this process statewide, what it looks like for us. Um, some other things I think about on your last point as far as the governing body. At first, I think you and I had talked, and not that I wasn't somewhat open to that piece, but how does that work, right? Where everybody's voice is really heard there from a utility perspective, because we run into different things all the time statewide. But I think for us, I mean, we want to try to make some things work and really work through some things. But it sounded like a lot in your presentation that so you're seeing e-utility, and maybe this is something you just haven't chatted with them about yet, right? But you see them more in a consulting role, if pretty much with almost all these steps for the most part, right?
It's a good question, and sort of it's again, I'm speaking for myself here. I see e-utility as essential for a variety of reasons, but probably most because of the trademark. All right. The pays model, there's a lot of different models out there. We went with the pays model because we felt like it made the most sense for consumers. End stop. It might not, result in, the most measures being changed right off the bat, but that's because it's designed to ensure that you're getting those savings. So I think it minimizes the opportunity for bad actors to take advantage of customers.
Yeah.
That's really important from our office's standpoint, because we don't need to be on the John Oliver show, all right,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
being played out there.
No, I get where you're going there. And I guess my biggest thing is really just understanding the, if that is the case, right, utility and all these other pieces, right, really how that works. And again, I come back to Spire, everyone else on here does have MIA, and there's certain protections and things in place. We would really have to understand from some of your regulatory discussions, right, what that truly looks like from a gas perspective, especially with other changes and when we talk about other federal money coming in. So we would just have to have real conversations, Jeff, to kind of, which I think we're trying to do here, but really taking a deep dive look at some of this. But I think as you know, Spire is always open to being collaborative and trying to figure out what kind of works best, especially from a statewide approach.
Thanks, Alan. Makes a lot of sense. And just to answer your question, where I really see utility in this, like again, this is just Jeff talking, but I see utility as more of the advisor, sort of, quality control manager. It may be like a better qualifier for this, and that there are third-party implementers putting out that program, doing the audits and moving forward with that, and then e-utilities effectively making sure that those programs are being run well and monitored or in adhering to that pays formula. But again, I'm not married to anything I've said today. I'll put that out there. This is meant to elicit discussion and thought, and we will be pushing actors to have opinions on this one way or the other moving forward. So thanks, Shannon. Renew Missouri. James, do you got any thoughts on this? Oh, looks like James might have fallen off. Okay. Philip, do you want to weigh in at all?
Yeah, I don't really have anything more to add. Just we want to keep following this, and really appreciate everything that everyone has talked about here in the PACE program. And I guess really we would just like to see it adopted in more places in the state, and we'd really like to see an example of a co-op taking it up when they have such a great financing opportunity in front of them and offering a program to their member owners.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think if you were to have a statewide program in some form or fashion, the cooperatives and municipals would follow suit. I think this is a case where if you build it, they'll come. Moving forward, we've got a lot on our plate here over the next year, not just with pays, but obviously different regulatory filings that are, set to occur in discussions. We, would encourage each of the utilities to keep up the dialogue with regulators and advocates. I think that's, the path of least resistance is just keeping it an open, honest, and dialogue moving forward. Probably, one of the more pertinent issues moving forward is also that of demand response and demand response measures. As if you've been watching the news at all in terms of reliability issues and potential, concerns over, blackouts. Shaylin, I see your hand up. Some insight?
Yeah. So can you, since we have staff on here too, would anyone from staff like to talk about anything they've heard today, Jeff?
Yeah, I should probably put Brad on the spot.
No, thanks, Shayla. No, I was actually thinking about putting myself on the spot anyway. I don't really have a lot to add. I would say I truly appreciate the discussion. I think it was good. I think it's important. I completely understand all of the sort of concerns or questions the utilities have going forward, because I think, myself and probably Jeff included, that's why we're having these conversations, to see if we can't come up with an answer. And I definitely don't know what that is. So I appreciate the discussion. And I'd probably just echo what I think we've said in the past, that, staff definitely will continue to support PACE programs, as long as they're, seem reasonable, structured appropriately. Again, that's very broad in general. But I think these conversations are helping us understand what that is, and I'd like to think making progress. We've obviously got the PACE programs for most, almost all, utilities, are the stakeholders on the call here anyway. So if we can figure out how to collaborate and come up with a way to get, something more collective in place, we're definitely we'll be along for the ride.
Brad, this is Keeble. Let me jump in here just real quick and say that in terms of Jeff Mark, you had on your last slide the herding the cats analogy, which I think is very apropos here. But I noticed under the regulatory or regulators, you had the benefit being efficiency, and it always scares me when people talk about we're going to increase the efficiency, because it seems like every time that we've added in the past here recently, we like when the utilities have gone in for legislative changes or regulatory changes, it seems to have had the opposite effect, even though it was touted as improving efficiencies. Whenever you get the additional line items on the customer bills, they somehow don't, the efficiencies don't pan out, but you wind up with additional cases to address those. So it seems like here I'm not exactly sure how whether you would address the line items on the utility bills in the utility rate cases, or whether you do it some other way. But I noticed you had possibility or likelihood of regulatory and or legislative changes would be necessary under all four of your different models, which you're probably right. But going back to what I said, that always scares me whenever I see changes in the legislature or rules to increase efficiency. It just normally doesn't work that way. It's been my experience, but I certainly hope I hope you're right. Let me say it that way. It sounded good. I guess the proof is always in the pudding, so to speak.
Words of wisdom, Mr. Keeble. Words of wisdom. It is not lost on us, and I think this needs to make sense for all stakeholders for it to move forward. So, thank you. Anybody else want to weigh in while we have an opportunity here?
Jeff, I kind of like to talk next steps, just statewide.
Sure.
Yes. So if there's no, this is Brad with staff. So if there's no other questions pertaining to the topic at hand here, I'd like to kind of maybe end with a little discussion on next steps going forward in the statewide collaborative process. So this is first one that we've had this year. Per the rule, we're required to have them semi-annually. That rule also places quite a bit of the those requirements and initiating. There's a number of things that staff are required to do through the rules, and I think there's charter language in there. We have a charter that kind of details some of the requirements of staff. I just want to say that, when we have statewide collaboratives like the one we had today, I think it's great, when we actually have a pressing topic. But I will say selfishly that it's also great, and I appreciate Jeff for kind of just taking the lead on this and running with it. It definitely was a relief for staff. So going forward, and the requirement of having another one this year still, I don't know if there's any thoughts on if there's any real pressing topics. I don't know if we can incorporate maybe a follow-up statewide on pays. Jeff, I know you had an August, September date. I don't know exactly what that would consist of, if that would even fit into a follow-up like this.
Probably not. I mean, honestly, the August, September follow-up is probably me contacting you guys individually, in getting some feedback in write-up and then sharing it with the group. Depending on how that plays out, we'd probably have a collaborative, but it probably, I mean, this is an abridged statewide collaborative anyway, right?
Sure.
We're not going the full slot, due to timing changes. But yeah, I guess TBD.
Well, and I think I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the reasons I bring this up is because, absent sort of an abridged collaborative, and then this is just my opinion, it seems as though some of the collaboratives we've had in the past, it almost seems as though sometimes we're having them just to have them. We are, sort of struggling to find topics to discuss, and it's just kind of piecemealed and, for lack of a better word, just kind of half-assed. And I don't think that's not efficient and beneficial for anybody's time. So a couple things to just kind of leave everybody with. One, with just the workload, that sort of seems to have become the norm and the new standard with all of the filings. This collaborative just is not typically at the forefront of our priorities. So if, I would challenge everybody, one, to think of topics, pressing topics that are useful and beneficial to everybody. Two, I would also appreciate if anybody would, offer to step up and take on, some of the roles or responsibilities that for whatever reason, staff, kind of got left with and required to do. Three, if none of the above applies, we would be open to filing a variance to the rule to not have this collaborative if we don't have pressing topics or topics of interest that all stakeholders can agree on to be, a useful way to spend time. So just some things to think on.
It's a collaborative, so, I think it's important that, if stakeholders want to put forward something, this is a forum for you to do it. Absent that, then not much of a need for the forum.
For the charter, technically at this stage, we would pick what group or
Oh, who would do it next?
utility would hold it next, and then tentative dates is how that's listed in the charter. That's kind of usually at the end of the the end of the meetings. I can't talk for some reason.
So there are rule and charter requirements. I don't know that we necessarily have to put anybody on the spot or try and force anybody into a role that they don't necessarily want. But yeah, just be cognizant of that. And like I said, we're required to have one by the end of the year. If it doesn't seem necessary to have one, I think there's measures to be taken to not have one. So
I guess, you know,
Brad, this is Keith. Well, let me just piggyback on what you said there. And I think what you're looking at, it would be both a combination of potential variance to the rule as well as potential amendment to the charter, both of which can be done, neither of which are extremely difficult, but they would require the collaborative, I think, to vote, at least to amend the charter would certainly require a collaborative vote on that. And as regarding your, like you said, the rule and the charter both currently provide for semi-annual meetings. And if you're having trouble getting, together twice a year, maybe that could be dropped down to once a year. But again, you could do so through a charter amendment and or variance to the rule. So I mean, it's not that hard, but it's just something that people need to consider.
Yeah. And I'll piggyback off your piggyback just with one more thing that, even if we amended the collaborative or the charter, there's nothing that precludes all of us from getting together at any time to discuss any topic that seems relevant. It just wouldn't necessarily be a requirement like it is now.
That's very true. Yes.
All right. Anybody else, while we've got a forum, anybody else would like to say anything?
Hey, Jeff, it's Brian. I'll just weigh in on the discussion around the MEAC go forward. I think we're open to various solutions there that were discussed, whether it's moved to once a year or put in as ad hoc to something to that degree. I don't actually remember, even though I'm sure I was involved at some point in time, what the MEAC was originally input into the document for. I mean, on its face, right? Sounds like a good idea. Let's get together and discuss things. But I understand with the actual reality that we've had with everything else going on, and obviously we're reporting to stakeholders every quarter and other kinds of things that we do. We're not talking. So again, I'm open to all those different kinds of solutions as we go forward. I guess I would throw that out there.
And then something I didn't realize, Brian, until Brad and I talked about this a few days ago, is how similar the rule and the charter are. Somehow or another, it looks like the one just wound up in the other. So it's like, I'm not even sure why some of these requirements show up both places, but they do. So that's kind of, I found that somewhat surprising, but.
A lot of that's a product of just its time. When those MIA rules were drafted last time around, MIA was very different. I mean, like everything about it was very different. Even the regulatory proceedings and the people involved. So we have definitely evolved over time. So this isn't the fact that you're not having biannual MIA meetings, on a statewide basis, I don't think is indicative of it not being successful. I agree with Brad. People are busy. There's a lot going on, and we're spread pretty thin as it is. But if there are groups out there, particularly non-utility groups that have issues that you'd like to discuss or present on, this is the forum to do it. So I'd encourage you to reach out to Brad and Corey about presenting, because that's what I did.
Yep.
That's actually how it is in
Yeah, that's how the charter works, right? Okay.
They're listed specifically as one of the groups.
All right, going once, twice. Thank you, everybody, for the 2022 biannual statewide MIA collaborative. I will follow up with individual stakeholders hereafter, and have a great rest of the day.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
See y'all. Thanks. Stay cool out there.